If we can do that, the quality of life in this city is dramatically improved. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Ken. We'll have chance for questions in a minute. Before I just ask Andy to say something, just to confirm the detail locally, in places like Westminster there are two groups of private tenants, really. There are people who are exactly the categories of people that Ken was referring to with reference to Henry Brook and Hampstead. These are the often pensioner households, people who have lived in their homes in places like Hampstead, Bayswater, South Kensington for decades in many cases, and as the rents have exploded, these people who never expected to find themselves dependent on benefits are now dependent on benefits. And I'm getting people coming to me, including constituents of Sir Malcolm Rifkind and other Tory MPs, and of course Mark Field. There was an example of a lady I met last week who is a Bayswater resident who's lived there for 30 years, who has suffered from a brain aneurysm, and whose adult daughter who lives nearby is dying of cancer. She will have a £7,000 loss in housing benefit payments on her property from next April. And these are the kinds of real faces of a policy, not the very, very, very rare examples that are featured at the behest of Westminster Conservatives on the Express. There are a few such extreme cases, and nobody wants to be spending £100,000 keeping people in the private rented sector. But those people are the second category, people who would have been in social rented housing in the days when we were building sufficient to be able to manage the needs of those people. 84% of Westminster residents in the private rented sector on housing benefit will lose, in many cases substantially, £85 a week in a 3-bedroom property. And where will they go? What will happen to them? Many of them will end up in Paddington Law Centre, and we'll hear from us in a minute. But Andy, of course, affected in very much the same way with the high values. Andy, would you like to just say what you think the impact will be for you?
Well, why don't I give you an example, a real case, my surgery on Monday this week, which is includes the housing benefit, but I think it will show how all the different forms of attack on people in housing need actually work together to try and achieve this ambition of removing poorer families completely from London over a period of time. There's a real case, not like the £100,000 housing benefit case, which the Tories cited, which was the made-up case. This is a real person, a real family. A father who's registered disabled, has 3 children, 19, 14 and 11, 2 girls and a boy, living in a 1-bedroomed, severely damp flat. It's actually a housing association flat, but because, like most housing associations in West London, they don't have a lot of big accommodation, he would be reliant on the council to rehouse him, and he would be entitled to 3 to 4, but in reality probably 3-bedroom property. Housing association will repair the damp to the flat, but only if he moves into bed and breakfast, unsuitable accommodation with 2 of his children, and the other child fends for themselves for 6 months, and then move him back into that flat. The council have offered to rehouse him, Hammersmith Council. They sent him a letter which misled me, let alone him, saying they would offer him, a move to secure accommodation in the private rental sector. What they meant was to secure in the sense of to find. It's not secure accommodation, it's temporary accommodation that a landlord could evict him from without reason after a year. And this is what's already happening before the proposals to abolish secure tenure for new tenants, which Grant Shapps has admitted that they are looking into doing in answer to a question from Karen in House of Commons 2 or 3 weeks ago, and before the caps on housing benefit come into effect. So what does it actually mean for his family? If he doesn't want his 3 children to continue to live with him in a 1-bedroom flat, severely damp conditions, he could move either to temporary accommodation or what's called direct letting, where the council simply finds a private landlord, helps you with the deposit and the housing benefit application, and then leaves you on your own. And again, completely misleading, he was advised to take the direct let accommodation. Direct let means often it will be in another borough. You have no relationship with the council at all. You're not on the council waiting list. You stay in with a private landlord. A lot of these private landlords have very substandard accommodation, even though they're being let through local authorities deals. And he'll wait until such time as the landlord thinks they can get a better deal, in which case they would then evict him. That takes 2 months. and he would then have to go back to whichever local authority area he was then in. It might be Barking, it might be Hillingdon, or who knows where it would end up. In the meantime, the whole family had to move, children leave schools, and so on and so forth. Of course, what they also didn't tell him is that from next year, when they have the benefit caps come in, he would have to move again, because for almost any 3 or 4 bedroom property in certainly in Hammersmith and Fulham, that will be over the caps, and therefore the council will not be empowered to pay the rent, and either you get into rent arrears and are evicted, or you have to voluntarily move much further outside London to be within the capped area. So fortunately, he was just about to accept a property, and I was able to advise him that he was giving up his secure tenancy, which he waited assured tenancy, which he waited many years for. And now he'll go back and think again, and I can take the case up for him. I should add one rider to that. Just on the way here, I was looking at the cuts I just got this morning to the voluntary sector in Hammersmith, which show that all the advice agencies in my constituency have had their grants cut by 100%. So threshold housing, the law centre, and we believe Children's Advice Centre from September will completely have their grants abolished. So there will be nobody to give that sort of advice in the future. So it's a combination of blackmail, do you want your children to grow up in these appalling conditions, trickery, take this lovely flat we're offering without telling you what the downsides of it are, and in any event, within a short period of time, we will be evicting you from there anyway, de facto, because we will not pay housing benefit for the rent. So incrementally, but now rather brutally, any family in that position, any family which is around the benefit will need to move out of London. And finally, just back up to Ken's point, why are we in this position at all? Why do we have so many families reliant on housing benefit in the private rented sector? And to listen to the Tories, you think they were living the life of Riley. The fact is, market rents in the private sector, the very poor quality accommodation in West London, are very high. This is not paying for a Rolls-Royce service. This is paying often for very, very poor quality accommodation. The reason being that councils like Hammersmith, and prior to that Westminster and Wandsworth, have done everything they can, not just not to expand, but to reduce the quantum of affordable housing that's available. And without opening up a whole new topic, you'll probably be aware that Hammersmith Council is in the process of demolishing several thousand council homes, of selling off existing homes and hostels, of giving back affordable housing to developers, and refusing to put any affordable housing into new developments across the borough, with a net effect that of course a squeeze on existing accommodation, levels of overcrowding, and the need to use the private sector has increased dramatically over the last 5 years. So you put that all together, what have you got? You've got simply a funnel pushing anybody on a low income, anybody reliant on benefit, and only one of 8 people on housing benefit are actually unemployed. They're mainly pensioner households and people on low incomes of that kind, out of London altogether. And simply saying, as Ken said in his opening remarks, there's no place for you here anymore. That's the biggest challenge in housing post-war. It's the biggest social change, as well as the biggest impact on housing policy and attack on increasing poverty that we will have seen far beyond anything that happened in the 80s and 90s.